Thanks everybody for joining today. This is a webinar with Davies Group. So we'll do some introductions and then we'll get straight into the webinar itself. So firstly, thanks for joining. It's going to be a recorded session, so we can share the recording with you afterwards, so you can share it with colleagues. My name is Josh Giovanni. I'm the head of sales here at Thrive. And today I'm joined by Ben Hurrell, who's a senior learning experience consultant at the Davies Group. Maybe over to you, Ben, actually, to a little introduction for yourself as well.
Certainly. Hello and good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Ben Hurrell, and as Josh said, I'm a senior learning experiences consultant for Davies Learning Solutions. We are just an organization who delivers both digital and face-to-face learning solutions to clients around the globe on leadership, customer experience, and anything else where there's humans involved. Really, we'll try and help. So we've been asked today to come and join Thrive to talk a little bit about what we do and how we do it and the way that we bring learning to life through learning campaigns in there. So Josh, I'm happy to get started.
Let's do it, Ben. Over to you to kick things off.
Fantastic. So I have the chat open, everyone. So if there's any questions that you have throughout, please feel free to jump in the chat with any comments, to react to any questions or any ideas you want to float past the group as well. Because that's how I know I enjoy webinars, when they're a bit more collaborative as well. Thank you very much. I have chosen not to go with a standard kind of Microsoft Teams background, so you'll have to enjoy my banjos and that sort of thing. No music today, I promise.
Maybe at the end.
We shall see. So we put together the question there going, is blended learning still the focus for L&D? And this came about as a thought for us because blended learning is one of those terms that we use, our clients ask for, and we certainly use. But the idea is that in 2021 and moving forward is it enough to fully engage your learners and enough to generate great results? And that's what we'll be talking about in a bit more detail today. So our three main talking points that attracted you to come on board today are, so what is a learning campaign and how they can transform your approach to L&D. We're going to talk about ways to execute learning campaigns that engage employees. And you'll hear me talk about engage an awful lot today, and drive maximum participation and then ultimately results. And we'll talk a little bit about how we and Thrive's going to share how other clients can use Thrive LXP, and also I'll share some stories about how we do it to apply this approach in the real world for both employees internally in our own company and with clients around the globe. So that's our plan for today. I want to start off with a little bit of context as to why we need to learn from marketing and how this links to blended learning. So there's a few logos on the screen, but let me explain. The first kind of aspect to this with blended learning, any learning intervention we do, any webinar, any coaching session, is time.
I didn't understand that.
So time is a really important thing for us. We are probably never more distracted by meetings, by managing our personal life at home while we're all here, managing client expectations. We're in an increasingly global world where time zones form part of what we do. Time is always a challenge. So creating learning experiences has to be as efficient as we possibly can be. The other part is that mobile phone symbol, that connectedness. Never has there been any time before where we are more connected to the world. This is a fantastic thing. This gives us great opportunities in learning, both digital and face-to-face, to engage people, to get people involved in different types of learning, to bring people together who otherwise would not talk. Sounds great, right? However, there has never been a time where we have been more distracted, whether it is, the fact that the notification goes off and we need to answer that email, we need to do that important meeting. We need to catch that Pikachu. There's a lovely outdated 2016 reference there. Maybe it's, our personal life, our banking, technology, and as never before is trying to pull us away. So from a learning perspective, getting people's attention is hugely important for us as well. The other flip side to that is Microsoft Teams and Microsoft Zoom. Not Microsoft Zooms, Zoom, Teams, WebEx, Adobe. We have so many meetings. Please answer in the chat how you're feeling about all your meetings being online. I'd love to know. I can only kind of really speak to my experience, but I know it is a challenge. We're all starting to feel that Zoom fatigue. Yeah, Amy's just come through and said exhausting, and I'm with you. The amount of attention you have to give, and if you are in a learning context, delivering your training. If any of you are trainers on here, I don't know if any of you are missing the opportunity to strut like a peacock in a classroom. I know I certainly am. It's so hard to channel all your energy when your whole body language is reduced down to the size of a postage stamp on a screen. So we're facing a massive kind of challenge with online participation around getting people excited, but also engaged with it when we're doing Teams, Zoom, doing Zoom quizzes with family and trying to teach elderly relatives, no, you're on mute. You're on mute. You're still on mute. It can be frustrating. We can get tired of it. And then ultimately, as organizations are trying to be as efficient as possible, there is that monetary cost as well. So any kind of marketing that goes out there, if you think of it that way, has to get people to buy the product. It has to get people to get the results. So money is always important. So this is our context that we're jumping off point from today, that time is a challenge. Attention is a battleground with people who've never been distracted as before. We're facing that Teams and Zoom fatigue, and we have to be efficient as well. And using marketing principles can help us do that. It's about engagement. And I brought up engagement as my first kind of talking point, because when it comes to learning, if you do not have a audience who really love being there, if they don't want to be there, they will let you know. And especially virtually. I don't know if any of you have been delivering training virtually or looking at results from digital learning, but there's a big challenge when you're talking to the void and people aren't responding and not engaging. So how we get engagement is really, really important. I think Siddharth made a really great point we're not really going to touch on today, but it's definitely one to look into, is that kind of digital literacy gap. And if that is a gap within your own organization, is, what can you do to get people up to speed? And actually learning by doing through a platform like Thrive is actually a really useful solution to help people. But yeah, and also the personal impact of everything that's going on as well. But around engagement, going back to this, this is where my kind of thinking started with talking about marketing. Now, I'm not a marketeer. I do a little bit, but it's not my day-to-day job. So my knowledge is foundational. But you can take the basic principles of marketing and apply them to what you're doing in learning. How to get engagement, how to get better results. Think about it as a marketing campaign. When you look at marketing, there's generally 4 steps to the basic kind of marketing cycle or process, which is ideation. A great idea has been sparked off somewhere. Research and testing. Focus groups sitting around with little juice boxes talking about how a certain color palette makes you feel. But that idea of, we do the analysis. Advertising, getting your message out there using different mediums and media to be able to do it. So I don't know about you guys, but I'm big into my kind of online world, and even using YouTube now, there's adverts all the time. We're very used to receiving advertising all the time as a kind of consumer-based society. So advertising is the norm. And then there's the selling, the actual process at the end, as simple as possible to get people involved. Now, that probably comes as no surprise to any of the participants on here, that that's how marketing generally works. You come up with an idea, you research it, you advertise it, and you expect that behavior at the end. You buy this new car, join this course. We tend to get that. So how does that relate to learning? And that's why we're really here today, is what can we learn from this basic principle of marketing and apply it to learning, and why should we? I was thinking about this and generally kind of mapping what the learning cycle is against this flow of marketing. Now, it does start off with ideation, that thought of coming up with an idea. When we're training or we're coming up with training, if you are an external consultancy, internal L&D, or even a project stakeholder or operations manager, training will often come about because there is a catalyst. There is a reason for the training to occur. So Sid, I put a good one there about the digital literacy gap. There's a digital literacy gap in our organization or society, if you're in that way. So what do we do? Research and testing is very familiar to anybody who's worked in L&D. So it's analysis and design and focus groups and skills gap analysis. It's competency mapping and frameworks, and it's getting to know what your people love and how they like to learn. At the end, the selling makes a lot of sense for us because it's the results that we achieve through learning, because learning has to achieve results. But that third step potentially is a bit different. And this is where my learning kind of switched on, and what we do here at Davies and what I've been doing for the last 5 or 6 years in L&D is thinking about, it's not just about delivering the training, because you can deliver that as great as you can. You might be the most charismatic facilitator, you could be the expert, but unless you attract people to that, you're not either going to get the right people in the room, or you're not going to have the right level of engagement and excitement when we go into it. So that role of advertising forms an important part of what we do. The role of advertising has to form an important part of what we do. And I'll give you some examples of things that we've done in the past and some ways of doing it, and a little bit more about the why and how we have taken this idea and put it into a learning process, which helps us through there. So hopefully we get that one. It's a pretty simple idea that marketing follows a process, L&D follows a process. Let's look at where those intersect as we go through. Before I start, quick question to the group. Answers in the chat, please, for nothing other than bragging points, or maybe I might give you some Harry Potter points. What is the reason learning and development exists? What do you think? Why do we have learning and development partners? Why do we have departments, teams of trainers? What is their purpose for existing? So Barry's put down to drive the performance of our people and the business. Anybody else? I think Barry's got a good insight there.
I think I'd agree with Barry on that one. That's similar to what I'd say for sure.
Brilliant. Yeah, so some good ones. So about driving the business faster for pace. Paul, brilliant. Really well done. Yeah, it's a really good point. It's about speed, picking up agility, stepping stone to personal and professional growth. Thank you. It's not just about what the person can do for the business, but creating better people makes for a better, more rounded organization. Help people grow, make sure that people have the capability to drive strategic objectives. Karen's interesting point there is never worth forgetting around to help with onboarding, but also kind of cultural development. And that can mean lots of things, but if you've got a good culture and identity and brand internally, then absolutely learning and development can form a big part of that. It's one of those interesting things that when times are tough, L&D tends to be the one thing that's kind of maybe dialed down a little bit, but interestingly, it is, as Barry said, one of those ways to drive performance through it. So I've defined it, and thank you very much to everyone who's popped in there. So it's a good mix of kind of competence, development, and business growth. As I put down, it is to achieve real results through people performance. And that very much is in line what you guys have said. It's what we based our whole business around 17 years ago in the contact center and customer experience space. Was we even named our organization Real Results to start with, and that's what it's all been about. It's the first question we ask is, what do you want to get out of this training? So this is where we were thinking, we know why we exist. We, as an external L&D company, and I've been in internal organizations as well, is, we want to help achieve results, but develop people along the way. And when we take that sort of purpose, that burning fire of reasoning for being, and we think about how do we achieve that, but at the same time do it and take on board marketing principles, because we're in that world of attention deficit and challenging people to get on board, and when they're busy, prioritize it, is we bring together everything into a learning and development campaign. What is a learning and development campaign? I hear you ask. I can hear these 73 people in here going, Ben, that's all very good, but tell me about what a learning and development campaign is. Don't worry, this is the time. So it is using a range of communication, marketing, coaching, and embedding techniques to build audience engagement. Said I'd use that word a lot. Engagement. Drive participation. How many people are going to get involved, but what's the quality of their experience when they are participating? And how are we going to activate that learning, embed it, make it happen, make it work? And that's really important for us. So how do we engage, drive participation, and activate learning? Because if you don't do all three of those things, a learning campaign will not exist, and you will have just delivered a nice day out. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the concept of a nice day out, but I'm sure many of us will be familiar with the little happy sheet we fill out at the end of training. How did you enjoy the training? Oh, it was a nice day. I got to have some nice lunch. It was nice to meet with some nice people. And then the trainer was very friendly. Great. But that does not show that we've achieved great results. So a learning campaign is how we consider all three of these elements from the beginning. How are we going to engage an audience? How are we going to drive participation? And how are we going to activate that learning? So we, A, know that it's working, and B, make sure that it sticks. The ever-present challenge in learning and development, making learning stick. So our first element here is engage. And I'm really, really keen to give you a few examples of how we do it, and also some ideas that you can take as well. So I feel very passionate about engaging the audience in the process. So when we engage, we want to build anticipation and get people excited through communication and content. This can be done through picking up the phone, having conversations and meetings to let people know that it's happening, involving people in the analysis phase, that ideation process, getting posters out. I know it sounds a little bit cliched in the 90s, but visibility is important. Movie trailers, podcasts, written briefings that are coming out. Have a webinar like this, where you get somebody engaging to talk about great processes. Make sure the communication's out there, you get them involved in the analysis, and make sure that there is a good theme to connect everything to. Now, this is important to have a good theme, I think, whether it's improvement or personal growth, or perhaps you have something a bit more novelty. I remember one organization that I've worked with in the past. I did a program around customer experience, and it was all based around the idea of a circus. So everybody had some very kind of circusy themed stuff to start with, a bag of sweets and treats. There was definitely candy floss. And it's just ways of getting people engaged and excited to take part. Curiosity is a powerful driving factor. Now, that said, I tend to favor the more silly, daft, creative, and colorful, but that's not always appropriate. So that's very good for your kind of customer agents or your frontline kind of teams. And I'm not saying it would not work with leadership. I'm just saying that you would want to be mindful of creating the right respectful tone. And I share that information from experience, because I realize not everybody has my certain joie de vivre for doing silly things. So you live and learn please from me. Don't ask senior leaders to share pictures of themselves in fancy dress, for example. That's just a random example.
What's your advice, Ben, for people on the call who might be doing that, like the different cultures and different industries and different types of people you're delivering training to? How would you position that?
Yeah.
Would it be working close to stakeholders, position it in the right way?
That's exactly right. And communicating. Fantastic question. I think if you are internal and in learning and development, I know HR would normally say that they are the kind of key holders and gatekeepers of the culture within an organization. But I personally always feel that learning and development are the beating heart who live and breathe it every day, the positivity. So you should know your culture. You should know the language and the tone of voice that you use to it, and how your leaders will respond to various different things. So yes, when you are engaging with your senior stakeholders, is, you know, try and share creative ideas to test the water with them about what you think the leaders will be up for. And this is just, I probably spend quite a lot of my time initially thinking about engagement, because how I engage the stakeholders in forums and workshops is all part of this process. A training needs analysis for me is, and we refer to it here as the engagement process. So building credibility with senior stakeholders, as well as the teams that we have as well, all forms part of the engagement process. And this will help you decide on your kind of marketing approach to work out what you want to do with your teams and participants. So you've got engagement there. So I feel that's very, very important. Lots of things there, but my one bit of advice is just communicate and work with your senior stakeholders to work out what's appropriate. Our next step, if you remember, so we've got engagement, part of the triangle. Participation. So participation is where your blended learning approach comes in. So the question I posed at the beginning of this question is, you know, is blended learning still what we need? And yes, is the short answer. But it's the filling in the juicy jam sandwich that is the learning and development process. We want to kind of very much mix up the participation approach. And this is a whole webinar in itself, but the Teams and Zoom fatigue that we're all facing, we want to try and mix it up. So if we are creating human-led, we refer to anything which is kind of instructor-led as kind of human-led learning. So that could be face-to-face, or it could be virtually. You want to try and make it a very kind of exciting, engaging process where people get a chance to interact. That's the big challenge virtually. It's about getting interaction every sort of 5 minutes or so is the kind of golden rule. And then blending it with the kind of more automated digital experiences that learning and development have grown over the years, whether that's your standard e-learning, but also your live streaming, your coaching experiences online, your social learning, your interactive learning experience module. So we design training for platforms digitally, which involves a lot more kind of business simulation. So even systems training is don't make it just something you read, make it something you do. Is very important to us, and you know that's great to have platforms that can support that. But participation, I think we get. Yeah, it's about attending a course and making it as good and as engaging and as exciting and useful as possible. And then the last one, often overlooked, especially when times are busy, is activating learning. So how do we activate? And they've got a few examples on the screen of pictures. You can get people to do videos. You can get people to write a blog. You can get people to join in on calls afterwards. Fill out a questionnaire, of course, but don't just do one straight after training. It's about doing it later. One thing we have at Davies is we've got something called Errol, which is a learning technology where we get people to fill out everyday questions on an online platform, which, because as you will know, 80% of everything you learn in a training session just kind of walks out the back door of your head after about a week. And we know that. So we have this kind of technology platform that we use, but you know, we can help you with that. But if you just look at the principle of it, it's just getting people to think and reflect and not let learning get lost. But write blogs, get people to give video testimonials and share, and that will help you re-engage your next audience as well. It is without, if you don't activate learning and measure results, then the training probably hasn't served its purpose. And if it has, you don't know.
And Ben, quick question for me. How has designing learning experiences changed when it comes to participation and activation since the pandemic started? Like,
oh, great.
Pre-pandemic, was it different or?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. So it is different because I think that the expectations of what people have virtually for kind of activating or participating have gone up. As companies have scrambled to the digital revolution, we have seen an increase in standards of even the online forms that people complete are not tick box exercises now.
Yeah.
There's a lot more increase of video and blog writing as people are pushing themselves to try and find new ways to kind of make their learning stick. And also the shift towards digital has meant that things that were face-to-face compliance learning for a lot of organizations, smaller ones especially, have moved more digitally, which has been a new skill set for a lot of organizations to think, well, how do I measure people's ability and knowledge has been retained? How do I store that information from a compliance perspective and moving forward? So a bit of a mixture of learner expectation has gone up because we live in a 4K Ultra HD world that now people, won't watch YouTube videos even in poor quality now because they don't have to. What absolute poverty. Ugh. So yeah, we live in that. So design expectations have gone up, and for organizations it's been they're never going to go back now from this kind of digital revolution and the blend of learning. Yeah, but I think it's a good opportunity to think, reflect as a group here with the panelists around what do you feel was most important in your process. So which of these stages do you feel is kind of missing in your L&D strategy? And there we go, as if by magic, the team have popped the poll up on the screen. So I'm curious about what you guys think. If you think, where are you? So my approach to a learning campaign, and when I do it, am I good at engaging, or is that something I could do better? What area of this do you think is your area of growth? Just where you think and want to measure your response. I think another point from Siddharth, thank you for participating in the chat so much. So putting a burden on updating content, I think, is a big sort of challenge. A lot of learning content that's online before all of this may have needed a bit of TLC, and this whole world that we're in has kind of shone a spotlight on the content as well. But yeah, ongoing, how to update it and keep things up to date, I think, are important as well, and a big challenge.
Interesting.
It is. I think I'm not surprised because I've been there. And being an external kind of L&D consultancy, we do kind of work inside our own organization, but a lot of our time, 80% of our time, is on the outside with clients all around the world. That activating learning has to be so important for us to show return on investment. I know I've sent a shiver down the spine of every L&D person because they've heard it. How do I prove return on investment for a leadership program? Once again, whole other webinar in of itself. Yeah. So yeah, engagement at 33%. So it's not just about the invites to it, but it's how we get people excited, engage with the right people. The participation guys seem to have pretty much nailed, which is great. So, we've probably all really adapted over the last 12 months to the new world, but activating that learning. And I know Vicky's put a note about keeping the momentum. It can be a challenge enough to get people to participate in learning as it is now, rather than keeping that momentum when they're meant to be taking that work onto the floor is equally as a challenge. So we've got the challenges of knowledge retention, behavior change. One of the big things we do is work with team leaders for coaching behaviors. So we can get that, if there are any Kirkpatrick fans in the room, that sort of level 3 feedback of results being influenced by behaviors. And that behaviors is what we like to observe and measure through observed virtual coaching sessions, questionnaires, gap analyses between how people feel they're being coached and how the coach is doing. But yeah, getting that inertia, which, interestingly, if you get the engagement right, is much easier. It's much harder to get that inertia in the activation if you don't set it up at the beginning. Like, we've done this great program, we'd now like to evaluate it. That's hard to go from a standing start. If you put it always as part of the program from the very start, so part of your engagement is identifying, we want to create this fun way of getting people on board, but at the end we want to, keep this going, get some blogs, excitement, so we can run a phase 2 to this in 3 months' time, is something that we'll regularly do with clients as well. So just reading the chat then. Yes, I do. I think it has challenged our ability to build new relationships, but also maintain relationships virtually. But in terms of actual your day-to-day practical skills, I think for digital designers, it has, because expectations have gone up. And for a lot of L&D people who maybe like myself, maybe I'm guilty of it, was very, very comfortable in the classroom. I've been doing it for a decade. I know how to work a room, but actually being able to switch up my skills to be able to deliver virtually was an interesting learning curve. The techniques that you use, the certain rules, like engaging somebody every 5 minutes. So Andrea, yeah, absolutely. I think the remote working environment has impacted it, especially as a lot of L&D professionals are extrinsically motivated by and get energy from the people around them, that being alone is a challenge. But yeah, no, interesting point. Thank you. So what I'd like to do at this point is invite Josh to talk a little bit around the potential for Thrive to support with learning campaigns. And I'll try and help with any questions that I think come up. Josh, if that's all right.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks, Ben. I'm going to share my screen. So if you just stop sharing yours, and you should be able to see my screen now. Can you see that?
Yep.
Perfect. Yeah, so I just want to kind of follow on from what Ben's been talking around in terms of acting more like marketeers, and in particular using campaigns within learning systems to really drive engagement and performance. So I'll probably just begin with what a campaign actually is, and then I'll get into some of the detail. Effectively, within LXPs like Thrive, campaign functionality allows you to build a campaign around a program, an initiative, or something that's happening within the business, to structure that with content, to have a start date and end date to that, and then nudge people with content over a period of time. So here you could see I could build a campaign, I could title it something, give it a banner, have a start and end date. So it could be for a month or a week or whatever period you want to run it for. Share it with an audience in your organization. So many of our customers build campaigns specifically to sales or onboarding or leadership or a specific department, and then share that with everybody, and then individuals receive notifications. So really easy to build these campaigns. And you can see here one of our customers, Deciem, they're running campaigns almost every week actually, simultaneously across the business for different departments to really drive engagement into the platform. I think one of the problems of traditional LMSs in the last kind of 10, 15 years has been like, we expect people just to come to the platform. And we know from data that's not how it works. So what we need to do is really nudge people using data analytics and build these campaigns to bring people back into the platform on a regular basis. So that's just kind of what a campaign is at a high level. It allows you to structure it, start date and end date, share it with relevant audiences across the business, and then bring people into the platform. So I just want to show a few examples of this more than anything. So firstly, if I look at some here like Deciem, at the moment they're running on health and safety training. So it's a big initiative across their business, people returning to stores in certain countries because they're in retail, and they will have campaign content which drip feeds to individuals on a regular basis. So on Monday, they might share a video, on Wednesday, they share a PDF and that type of thing. So health and safety is a nice example there where you can really pull people back into the platform. And Deciem are quite creative with their campaigns. You can see here, if you finish them on time, you entered into a weekly draw to win an Uber Eats gift card. So a bit of a kind of competition in there to make sure you do it in a good pace. So that's one example. Other examples can be much more simple. So this customer here, Greater Places, when they launched their LXP, they actually use campaigns to actually make people understand how to use the platform in the right way. Again, although many systems these days are simple to use, it's quite nice to actually encourage people to learn and collaborate about how they should best use the system and kind of crowdsource that knowledge as well. And then some of the more kind of traditional uses of campaigns that we see across our customers is definitely things like management programs or leadership programs as well. So the idea is that you could start to structure that campaign with relevant content in this section here where you build it, and then drip feed content throughout the program itself. So let's imagine you have, a management program. It runs for 2 weeks. It includes some online events that you might attend. It might include some pathways to complete and some assessments. A campaign just brings it all together and helps you really structure that in a simple way and then nudge people. And, the notification systems in the platform now work in different ways. Firstly, you get email-based notifications. So people can get the notifications that a new piece of knowledge has been shared. And then when I click into this here, it would take me directly to that piece of content, directly from my email. A second type of notification will be push notifications on a mobile device, which is obviously very useful for mobile users. And then the third and most interesting type of notification, which we're investing a lot of our development time in at the moment, is integrating with tools that people use every day. So whether that's Microsoft Teams with an integration to the LXP to bring content into Teams where people are actively working, or perhaps platforms like Slack, again, sharing content into different Slack channels so that people don't have to go to a platform like this. So I think campaigns in the future will evolve to not just send people into the LXP like this, but they might evolve into bringing content into systems that people use on a daily basis, whether that be collaboration or communication tools. And what we're really seeing is that the best L&D teams are using data analytics to really understand how they should build and design campaigns themselves. So at the very beginning of this webinar, Ben was talking about the comparison of marketing and learning, and how marketing, when they're designing new initiatives, they will think about ideation and research and test. And I think in the past, L&D haven't always had the right data to help, what is this thing that we need to build here? So with platforms like Thrive, what we're offering is really deep and insightful analytics. So you can start to understand the behaviors of your employees. How are they actually engaging in the content? So are they searching for it? Are they seeing it through notifications? And then starting to understand what content styles are working more than others. So why would you build, for example, a campaign full of video content when actually people prefer articles or questions and discussions? So we're really giving customers that insight now into the behavior, the times in which people are engaging, so that you can really start to build that campaign. So as an example here, if I looked at a specific audience, let's take this customer and look at the UK, we could actually see what time people are engaging the most in the platform. So Wednesday at 12 o'clock is the time when most people in the UK in this platform here are engaging in content. So if I was building a campaign now, what I would start to do is schedule content. And if I just jump into something like this, I would schedule content to be shared at the right time to the right people. So you can really start to target them based upon the data analytics and the trends that you see. So that's something that we're helping our customers with now, which is just more data than ever before to build these campaigns. So in summary, in terms of what campaigns are, it's the opportunity to launch them into programs, different initiatives, whether that be more kind of formal things like leadership development, compliance, onboarding, new product launches and that type of thing. Structure them with videos and PDFs and PowerPoints and whatever it might be in there to really nudge people back into platforms. And as Ben said at the beginning, act more like marketeers, using data, using kind of research and testing to work out what works for your organization, because everyone's very, very different. So hopefully that helps just give an insight as to the campaigns themselves. Ben, have you got any questions or
I
do.
I think just what's useful is just kind of something that's really excited me that I saw as a notification come through on the LinkedIn was, I think it's really good to use, because Thrive just isn't about the online SCORM compliant e-learning module. It's about engaging people. And I'm thinking about different ways of activating learning. And I know these things aren't necessarily unique to Thrive, but they do them really, really well. But things like social kind of learning, blogs, comments, but also this new feature of broadcasting really kind of interests me. So I'd just like to kind of, how can people best use, do you think, broadcasting? Do you think it's still based on that data analytics that you showed? At what time? Is there a certain time where you think that broadcasting is going to be most effective? Or
yeah, it's a good question. So broadcasting is a new tool which allows you to live stream to the entire organization. And I think a really good use case for that will be, building a campaign, and a part of that will be a live event. And rather than having to use Teams or Zoom or Hangouts and those tools, it'll be a fully integrated broadcast within the same platform that people are doing their other learning in as well. So I think for us, it'll just be a new content type, but one which will really drive engagement with some of the things that we're doing now, polls and discussions. And then at the end of it, save and record that session so it can be shared with other people who missed it. So I think it's just another medium of media which we're actually using to drive engagement to the platform, and one which I think our customers will be excited about.
I feel so. As somebody who uses it, I think we can see the potential internally because we have quite a geographic diaspora around where we're all spread,
Yeah.
and doing things on Teams and calendar invites sometimes kind of lacks the bit of the ceremony that comes with doing it through the learning system. So I think I threw the questions. A few people did kind of questions out there. I'm just curious if anybody else is curious about doing more kind of broadcasting and live streaming, because it's certainly something that I think is going to be one of the most important things. I have a few friends who have a kind of a digital marketing company, and they are doing a lot of work at the minute about connecting brands with fans and creating fans internally, and how they use live streaming to do that is something that's really kind of inspired me to do a bit more, and it's brought me to you guys today to want to get a bit more experience of. I just think as long as it's interactive, I think it's pretty good. It's challenging if you can't have dialogue.
100%.
But no, fab.
Well, thanks for that, Ben. And I've got a few more questions as well, which I think I've got some for you, and then I think there's some which I'll probably answer. What's your kind of experience, Ben, working with like user-generated content as part of campaign? So like I know like Deciem here, actually, they've got some kind of user-generated video content in here. Are you seeing that as a kind of good way to drive engagement?
Yes and no. I think they can be really useful when I've seen it done well. And I've seen it done well in a few organizations where people have really got on board. There was one organization I work with, I know Thrive does work with them, a large consumer media company who has something to do with clouds. And they did it. So we had like the L&D team would write kind of content that was user generated. It wasn't necessarily approved. It was very organic, and people really learned from it and responded and engaged. And most of the learning actually happened in the kind of comment section in the bottom. I think user generated content is super important. You look at how people are consuming media, and this once again, whole webinar in itself, but the coming up of the Zoomers, the Gen Zs, how they like to learn is a lot by doing. You look at how they consume media, look at the meteoric rise of TikTok, and how kind of short, simple stuff engages with that sort of audience. So short interactive videos, I think we're going to see like 1 minute toolboxes to engage people. But currently from what I see, people writing articles, people doing blogs after training, videos about what they learned, top tips, sharing best practice, bringing together communities of participants together to share ideas and their practical application, as well as new ideas. I think it is, definitely part of it. So
yeah, definitely. And we've had another question from Alex here on how do you overcome the risk of tumbleweed when you offer user-generated content? It's a big fear. Presumably you need a critical mass of users before attempting it. Maybe I'll take that first, Ben, and then you kind of finish off if you've got any other ideas, because I've worked with quite a few customers in this area. So what we find is you really need to identify the kind of champions in the business who will actively want to share their knowledge. So you really have to kind of work with different business units to identify, somebody within the sales or ops or marketing functions who will share their knowledge into a platform like this. And then once you've got kind of senior stakeholder sponsorship as well, they'll start to actually advocate for platforms like this. So like customers like Deciem, for example, the CEO will actively post videos into a platform. If the CEO does it, it kind of opens up the platform and more trust that everyone else can do it as well. So I think it starts with the top and finding experts within different functions, but it's definitely a fear. I think you just need to experiment with it in different departments as well. So there's lots of different ways of starting with it. I don't know what you think of, Ben, as well, around how you do.
I agree. If it's looking at the kind of that post-learning writing and follow-up, I think it's easier to inspire them in the room. If you're looking generally, my advice would always be to get influencers in your business. Now, I don't mean that in the hashtag Instagram sort of way. I mean that in finding the people on the teams who have a voice already in the organization. And these might be your champions, the people who are really good. But I actually find it more powerful if you get the people who have a huge sway in like the water cooler moments. Like there's normally somebody in your teams who's been around a long time, who's a little bit maybe disenfranchised sometimes. They're normally called like Dave, Steve, or Brian, just causing a broad thing. But they've been there a long time. They're like, oh, we tried that before. It didn't work. It didn't work. But these are the people that if you can get them on board, writing content, engaging people online, people do listen because they're like, oh, if they're involved, oh, I should really be involved. And I tend to find that these people, if you tell them that they're an influencer in the organization, there's a little puff up with pride, and you get quite a bit of organizational kind of commitment. But yeah, the Brian and Steves who've been there a long time, who are a little bit fruity to manage, are really, really powerful tools in influencing. If you can get them involved in this process. How could I, Alex? How could I? But yeah, no, fantastic. That's all from me on that, Josh. I've got a few points to finish off. If you want me to reshare, you're on mute.
Classic. My fault. My other question was, what planning process would you take your customers through when designing kind of campaigns? So let's say you have a new customer at the Davies Group next month and you're helping them design learning campaigns. What are the steps that you go through to kind of build campaigns for them?
Well, the beautiful thing about being an external organization that comes in is we have a really deep appreciation that whilst some of the challenges might be the same, every organization has their own unique culture, just like you will have. So what we do is we keep quite a broad approach, but we stick it under these three headings of engagement, participation, and activation. So when we're doing our analysis, they're the 3 points that we're always looking at and asking the right questions on. How do we best engage people in what we're trying to achieve with the end goal? How do we get the best participation that's right for them? And what do we need to do to activate that learning to go around? Now, from that stems a huge kind of TNA process, potentially around looking at methods of delivery, content, tone of voice, marketing involving HR, OD, operational experts, all form part of this kind of three-pronged plan. But I feel it really is. Sorry, I just saw the comment that's come in. But if you just, these three umbrella terms, if you think of it every time, even if it's quite basic, even if it's like I'm sending invites, they come to training, I do a questionnaire afterwards, that is still, you've thought of it like a campaign. Because you've done your ideation, your research, your program, and you've got people to participate and you've sold it. So it's those three headings. There's probably one of my big takeaways for people to design it and think of all the tools that you have within that.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I'd add on to that is what I spoke about just a bit ago is just starting with the data as well. Like, what's the data saying about the organization from in terms of behaviors and all the things that the data in your platforms tell you, so that you can start to just shape those campaigns as well. If that data is there, it's not always there, but hopefully if the customer does have data from different touch points and different systems, that's always a good place to start as well. Perfect. Well, I don't think there's too many more questions. So I think we'll leave it there because we've been on for just short of an hour. Is there anything else, Ben, that you'd like to share before we wrap up and end this?
It's just I've got a few summary points on the slide that I think might be useful to take away. But apart from that,
good. Just stop sharing and then you can share again.
No problem. One moment, caller. Okay. So my kind of key points here is that blended learning is, yes, still a focus, but it's part of it, and your learners need more. Just like any type of product, L&D need to sell their services as a way to add value, because it is a battleground of attention and time and money, and we need to sell our services and engage them like marketing. Use campaigns that engage different levels of the business through different types of media, and don't forget the power of the word of mouth. I didn't really talk about that, but it's still the most powerful form of marketing is, have you heard about this course? If you can get that to happen, everything's organic. Drive participation through mixed up content, face-to-face if you can, virtual, digital, get the best you can be at virtual facilitation. Always activate learning afterwards and shout about the success of your campaign, and Learning Tech can support you. So be curious about out there. So I told you about what we do with our Errol platform and our design. I know Thrive, Josh done a really great job at showing you what's possible. So be curious about what's out there and how it can help in those three prongs of engage, participate, and activate. And as just one last note, we have 2 more webinars coming up as Davies. This one I think is going to be really interesting around from a design perspective. So I will pop the links to that in the chat in a moment. Actually, I know my colleague Leon is on, if he could post the links, because I can't seem to find them at the moment. So in creating engaging learning campaigns through great digital, we've got some of our digital designers who'll show you what's possible. And we're also running on the 28th of January a webinar for up to 20. If you're a senior learning leader and you want to solve some problems, we have a fantastic kind of someone who was a TED speaker, a global TEDx speaker, who's going to join us to actually go through some actual kind of sharing of solving problems and challenges that you're facing in the world of learning and business, which is going to be great. So please feel free to look at those either on our website, our LinkedIn. And I love to chat. So if you did want to reach out to me at all, have a conversation, or add me even onto LinkedIn, just to be part of your network, I'd love to connect with everyone on here a little bit further as well.
Perfect. Well, thanks everybody for joining today. Appreciate it. Thanks, Ben, for taking us through that as well. And yeah, stay safe and we'll see you all soon. Cheers, Ben. See you soon.
No problem. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.